All right. I hope you learned a lot through this course. Now focus on the key takeaways. So it's important to recollect what we learned in this course and also to put the same things in the resume. In this lecture, I'll help you recollect the things that we learned. So we started with understanding what is MLOps. Then we learned what is the scope of MLOps engineers through a beginner-friendly project. Then we learned about data version control. We explored how to implement TVC in real time. In the next section, we learned about experiment tracking and how to use MLflow for experiment tracking. The best part is that we learned production grade MLflow setup, and we also learned how to visualize the differences between two experiments. Then we focus more on deployment and serving because it's a critical activity for MLOps engineers. We learned model deployment and serving in 4 different ways. One is on the AWS virtual machines using web server gateway interface. Then we learned using Kubernetes clusters. We learned how to set up the cluster, how to containerize the model, and how to deploy the model onto the K8s cluster. Then we learned about Kserve, which is a very popular MLOps platform. We learned how to use Kserve inference service to deploy the model from a model registry. Finally, we also learned about a managed platform, that is AWS SageMaker. We explored how to set up SageMaker, what are domains, what are user profiles, how to implement strict RBAC with SageMaker. On top of that, we also learned how to use Jupyter Labs, how to create model, and how to deploy the model as well as endpoints using SageMaker AI. Then we focused on Kubeflow pipelines for orchestration of the pipelines. In the next few days, you will also see the complete CI/CD using GitHub Actions, DVC, MLflow, and Kserve, including Argo CD live. If you're watching this course during the launch, you might not see this lecture because this will be live in the next few days. So these are the key takeaways of this entire course. In the next lecture, I'll help you prepare the resume for this course. Finally, you want to transition to MLOps roles, I'm sure. So it is important to put the right points in the resume, and you should be able to explain those points in the interview. One final thing before I sign off, make sure you learn the things and implement the things practically. A lot of people approach me, Abhishek, I don't remember the things that I learned. I keep learning every day. The simple reason is because you don't practice the things. If you go through this Udemy course, you might quickly go through the lectures, but trust me, when you start practically implementing the lectures, you will learn a lot of things, even the things that I might not have covered, because you will run into issues and you will spend troubleshooting the issues. So that's all for this lecture. I hope once again, you enjoyed the course thoroughly. Okay, so now you learned MLOps from this course. I'm sure I have a question. How to transition to MLOps profile, or how to show your experience as MLOps engineer in the resume. Don't worry, I'll explain you that part as well in this lecture. So basically, let's say you come from DevOps or cloud background. I assume a lot of you come from DevOps or cloud background because it's easy to transition to MLOps from this background. Or even let's say you come from a different background, you can just follow the same things. In your resume, the one that you already have, so you have your professional experience. So let's say you have your experience as DevOps engineer, just add a new section. Okay, so simply add a new section, and within this new section, write down the points that you learned. So change your profile heading to MLOps engineer and write down few important points that we learned from this lecture, from this series. Let me help you with few points. And don't worry, in the notes of this lecture, you will also find, right? In this section, you will also find 20 interesting points that we learned in this series. So you can pick up few points from those 20 points and you can add them to your resume. Let me explain how to add them. For example, we learned how to design end-to-end MLOps workflow. So you can just add a point, designed and implemented end-to-end MLOps workflow. Just say covering model training, versioning, deployment, serving, and lifecycle management. So this is one point that you can add. Then we learned how to productionize the models, right? So we saw how data scientists create a model. Then we learned how to make this model production ready by implementing the infrastructure and MLOps practices. So you can also add a point related to that. We learned how to implement web server gateway interface. We learned how to implement gUnicorn, how to create Flask API. So you can also add a point related to that. Implemented custom model serving using Flask plus gUnicorn WSGI to understand low-level model serving before adopting the managed platforms. That is, even before going with Kserve or going with SageMaker, you can say in the lower-level moments, you have implemented model serving using Flask as well as GUnicorn. See, this is how you write the points. It's not that, you just say, I know MLOps or, implemented MLOps using Flask, but write the point in the resume in a way, both the recruiter as well as the interviewer gets interested in your profile. And if you observe carefully, I'm focusing a lot on the keywords, end-to-end MLOps workflow, model serving using Flask and GUnicorn. So if you highlight these points, it's easy for the recruiter to prioritize your profile. We also learned containerizing the machine learning workloads using Docker. So you can highlight that point as well. Containerized machine learning workloads using Docker, ensuring reproducible builds and immutable model artifacts. Again, keywords are very important here. I have used the keyword model artifact, I have used the keyword Docker, I have used the keyword containerization in the same line. This is just like SEO optimization. When someone creates a website, they make sure their website is SEO optimized. In the same way, when you create a resume, make sure your resume is also optimized. We also learned how to deploy the models to Kubernetes. So why to miss the opportunity? Put the point in the resume because Kubernetes is a highly rated keyword these days. So you can say deployed ML models on Kubernetes clusters and implemented Ingress for scalability. Along with that, we also learned, let me scroll down. I'll add a few more points. So you can pick up points as per your comfort. Once again, I'll share the points in the Udemy course section as well. Okay. So we learned Kserve-based implementation. I covered the Kubernetes part here, but we also learned how to implement advanced Kubernetes deployment using Kserve. So you can highlight implemented Kserve-based model serving, leveraging standard inference APIs and cloud-native deployment patterns. Kserve is very important. I told you during the lectures as well, because Kserve is gaining a lot of popularity. Even platforms like SageMaker, they are trying to implement integration with Kserve. So add Kserve to your resume. On top of that, you can also talk about how you have implemented Kserve-based managing for scalability as well. So you can say compared and evaluated Flask-based serving versus Kserve managed serving. So you can say here, you don't have to create an API, you don't have to containerize it. When it comes to Kserve, you can just provide the .pkl file in the model registry location. That's the beauty of Kserve, right? It makes the deployment and serving super simple. So you can elevate that point in your resume that you understand Kserve better. You can also say you have implemented model registry using S3. We did that both during the ML flow and also during SageMaker. So you can say integrated external model artifact storage like S3 buckets for model deployment in Kubernetes. We did this part during the Kserve lecture. In Kubernetes, we used S3 buckets as model registry. You can also talk about SageMaker. Very, very important point I'll add here. Understood and applied SageMaker domain, user profiles, IAM execution rules, ABAC, along with access control and security patterns. Even I highlighted this during the lecture that a lot of people don't understand how to implement SageMaker in production. So it's a value add to your resume. We learned that in detail in the section. So make sure you highlight that in your resume. In case interviewers ask you, what exactly did you do with SageMaker domain and user profiles? You can highlight the ABAC concept that you learned. Similarly, you can also say, I'm good with implementing end-to-end MLOps for IAM point of view. So you can explain in your organization, there are data scientists, ML engineers, MLOps engineers. So within SageMaker, I have separated the permissions using IAM-based roles. So you have implemented proper RBAC with SageMaker. You can also talk about deployments to SageMaker. How did you deploy? But on top of that, you can add an interesting point where you have applied CI for your MLOps. Applied MLOps automation principles using CI concepts for model training, artifact generation, and deployment readiness. We saw this part in the very first section where we try to understand what is the role of MLOps. And I have also implemented end-to-end CI/CD for MLOps. At this point of time, if you're watching this lecture during the course launch, it is pending live. But if you're watching 10 days after the course launch, that is roughly around 25th of December, you should already find end-to-end CI/CD pipeline implementation for MLOps. You can also talk about Kubeflow, right? Kubeflow lecture is already available. So you can say implemented end-to-end pipeline orchestration using Kubeflow. Once again, Kubeflow is a highly rated keyword. So make sure you have something related to Kubeflow in your resume. And finally, you can say strong understanding of real-world MLOps responsibilities. I developed a strong understanding of real-world MLOps responsibilities, including the deployment safety, infrastructure automation, and scalability. So this is how you can make your profile MLOps engineer profile. Very simple, right? So here, this person was a DevOps engineer. By adding these points, this person can show experience as MLOps engineer. Of course, during the interviews, interviewers will ask you the questions. So that is the reason why you learned MLOps through our course, and you have also practiced things from our course. So you don't have to worry. I'm sure First few interviews will be difficult because you might find new terminology in the interviews. You might find some intimidating questions in the interview, but that is how it works. It takes 10 to 15 interviews at least for you to get comfortable. And then, trust me, with the experience that you got from this course, you will be able to crack MLOps roles. So stay confident and prepare your resume well. This is a sample resume. I'll share these points within the Udemy course section, even if you're a fresher. Again, freshers have this question. Abhishek, you explain this for the experienced candidates. What about freshers? It's even simple, right? If you're a fresher, you just have this section in your resume. That's all. And you can say you learned this from our Udemy course. You can show the Udemy course certificate in your achievement section. Because as a fresher, it's totally fine if you tell the interviewers that you learned this course from Udemy, you completed the course, then you implemented it. Make sure you add your GitHub profile. So this is how it works. I hope it is clear to you how to show your experience as MLOps engineer in the resume. Okay, so you learned what is MLOps. You learned how to prepare resume for MLOps. What's next? This is interesting. So the next step is to keep yourself charged because MLOps is a field that is constantly evolving. In fact, most of the MLOps practices are today used in LLMOps as well. So if you're passionate about this field, if you constantly learn, you have a very bright future in the space of MLOps as well as LLMOps because MLOps is the key step for LLMOps. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed the course. See you all in the next course of our Udemy journey.